Tucked away behind Kensington's ivy-clad facades stands a home that few have ever seen, yet everyone in the royal circle knows. It belongs to Lady Sarah Chatto, the Queen's beloved niece, a painter of quiet genius and perhaps the most discreet royal of her generation. But what kind of life unfolds behind those tall sash windows and sunlit studio walls? Today, we're stepping into a world of inherited elegance, unspoken tradition, and a life shaped more by brushstrokes than by crowns. She was born where fairy tales begin, within the walls of Kensington Palace, on the first day of May, 1964. But unlike the stories spun of royalty, tiaras, and pomp, Lady Sarah Chatto's life would quietly slip down a different path. Why didn't she chase the spotlight like others in her family? What made the Queen's niece trade palace balconies for painting studios? The answer begins in her childhood, a world where Baroque mirrors hung over nursery cribs and corridors echoed with both tradition and tension. Sarah was the only daughter of Princess Margaret, the glamorous yet often misunderstood sister of Queen Elizabeth II, and Anthony Armstrong Jones, the stylish, sharp-eyed photographer who became the first Earl of Snowdon. Together, they were an artistic whirlwind. And from that whirlwind, Sarah emerged, calm, observant, and drawn more to colors than to crowns. She and her older brother David were raised in apartment 10 of Kensington Palace. But royalty didn't mean freedom. As their parents' marriage unraveled, Sarah often found herself caught between two worlds, the chaos of personal heartache and the unchanging rhythm of royal duty. At just 12, her parents separated. At 14, they divorced. Where did a young girl find refuge in the midst of such upheaval? In the pages of sketchbooks. In summer escapes to Sandringham and Balmoral, where while others rode horses, Sarah painted landscapes. Even then, her path was beginning to take shape. She pursued her passion academically, attending Bedales School, known for its liberal arts-focused curriculum. She didn't follow the traditional royal track. Instead, she chose Camberwell School of Art, and later the Royal Academy Schools, institutions where fame held no sway and talent was everything. And then, she disappeared, not into scandal, but into India. For 2 years, Sarah followed her father as he worked on the cinematic masterpiece, A Passage to India. There, among the rich fabrics and golden heat, she found not only inspiration, but love. It was in India that she met Daniel Chatto, a young actor working on Heat and Dust. Their connection was instant. But we'll come back to that later. While others in the royal family were being groomed for public life, Sarah was gilding wood, learning textile design, and interning in costume departments. Who knew that a royal could find fulfillment not in duty, but in design? Back in England, she completed a course in textile and fabric design at Middlesex Polytechnic. But it wasn't just technique she carried with her. It was a quiet defiance, a gentle insistence that her life would not be dictated by protocol, and in time, that choice would lead her to acclaim. In 1995, under the name Sarah Armstrong Jones, she began exhibiting at the prestigious Redfern Gallery in London. Her work, subtle, emotive, and deeply personal, caught the attention of the art world. She wasn't just a royal who painted. She was an artist who happened to be royal. But what does a life of such self-crafted serenity look like behind closed doors? To understand that, we must step inside the very place where Sarah found both shelter and inspiration, her breathtaking Kensington residence, a house where brushstrokes speak louder than titles, and where royalty is not worn, but lived quietly. Kensington residence. In the heart of Kensington, where every brick seems to echo with centuries of aristocratic whispers, lies a home that doesn't clamor for attention. It simply exists, beautifully, quietly. And that's exactly how Lady Sarah Chatto prefers it. But don't be fooled by its modesty. This $8 million Georgian-style residence is more than a house. It's a reflection of Sarah herself, Elegant but unassuming, traditional but touched with artistry, and filled with light rather than noise. So, what do you see when the black iron gate swings open? A soft gravel driveway curves inward, guiding you toward the stately front entrance. The exterior, red brick, perfectly symmetrical sash windows, and vine-covered walls, immediately speaks to an era where grace mattered more than grandeur. Stepping inside, you're greeted by an interior that spans over 12,000 square feet, spread across 4 generous floors. But despite the scale, there's no sense of excess. Everything is deliberate, thoughtful, just like Sarah's brushstrokes. The entrance hall is filled with natural light, thanks to towering windows and high ceilings. Pale wood floors stretch beneath your feet, inviting warmth and softness into a home that could have easily leaned toward museum-like coldness. But not here. To the right, the living room opens wide, a space where classic British design meets quiet modernity. Muted greens and soft creams wash over the furniture, with understated velvet chairs gathered around an antique fireplace. On the walls, not royal portraits, but her own paintings. Landscapes from Balmoral, sketches from India, watercolors born of memory and mood. In the dining room, a long oak table runs the length of the space, sometimes dressed for family meals, other times for small private gatherings. The tableware? Understated but refined. Bone china, nothing flashy. One could imagine Christmas Eve here, with her sons home from the Royal Marines and sculpture studio, the windows fogging with the warmth of laughter and tradition. Now the kitchen. It's not the kind you'd find in celebrity mansions filled with marble excess. Instead, it's functional, elegant, and deeply personal. A mix of vintage wood cabinetry and modern appliances, proof that style and substance can live side by side. There's a sense that meals here aren't catered, but cooked. Perhaps a quiet breakfast, or tea with a close friend, surrounded by the scent of Earl Grey and oil paint. And then, the private quarters. The house boasts 8 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms, but it never feels overwhelming. Each room is its own world, designed for comfort and calm. The master suite is likely where Sarah begins her day, with morning light pouring in, filtered through gauzy curtains, the faint aroma of lavender rising from the garden below. There's even a private home gym and a double garage, but the most captivating feature is tucked away at the back. A small yet purposeful art studio, flooded with northern light. This is where she paints, where thoughts become color, where royalty fades and creativity takes its rightful place. Beyond the studio, the garden stretches out like a private park. Neatly manicured hedges border lush green lawns. A few flowering trees sway in the wind, and a stone path curves to a small bench. One can picture Lady Sarah sitting there in the early evening, sketchbook in hand, her dog at her feet, the city muffled behind brick walls. This home, located in one of the most prestigious corners of London, isn't about status. It's about sanctuary. A sanctuary for an artist who just happens to carry a royal title. But what does a day in such a life look like? To understand that, we must go beyond the house and into the soul of Lady Sarah Chatto, where artistry meets royal duty in the most unexpected ways. Not all royals make headlines. Some make brushstrokes. And Lady Sarah Chatto, with her delicate touch and quiet gaze, has long chosen the latter. But what does it mean to be both an artist and a royal? Can devotion to one ever truly escape the shadow of the other? Lady Sarah never sought a throne, nor the flashing bulbs of paparazzi. Instead, she built a life defined not by duty in the traditional sense, but by devotion to craft, to beauty, to legacy. Since 1995, under the name Sarah Armstrong Jones, she has exhibited her art at the prestigious Redfern Gallery, one of London's most revered showcases for contemporary talent. And this was no royal favor. Her work stood on its own. Evocative landscapes, subtle studies of light, and an almost meditative attention to detail. Critics praised her early pieces, and her accolades came quickly. The Winsor and Newton Award in 1988, and the Creswick Landscape Prize in 1990. But where did this gift come from? Some say it was her father, Lord Snowdon, a renowned photographer and designer, who passed on the eye. Others believe it was her way of processing the quiet turmoil of her upbringing. Whatever the reason, Sarah didn't just paint scenes. She captured silences. She preserved the soft in-between moments. A tree just before dusk, a window with afternoon shadows, a memory not yet faded. But art wasn't her only devotion. In 2004, she stepped into the role her mother once cherished: Vice President of the Royal Ballet. To many, it was simply ceremonial, another royal nod to tradition. But for Sarah, it was personal. She had grown up backstage, surrounded by point shoes and stage lights, watching her mother champion the arts with elegance and vigor. For 20 years, Sarah supported the ballet with the same quiet determination that defined her art. And in 2024, she was appointed president of the Royal Ballet, continuing a legacy of cultural stewardship with grace and zero fanfare. Yet despite her titles, Lady Sarah remains a non-working royal. She has no official duties, no royal wage. So why does she still appear at state funerals, jubilee celebrations, or those quiet walks from Sandringham's Christmas chapel? Because loyalty to her isn't loud, it's consistent. Those who know her, insiders, staff, even senior royals, speak of her with one word: steady. Steady in her presence, steady in her values, steady in her refusal to be swept up in the noise. Even Queen Elizabeth II was said to have been especially fond of Sarah, not because she demanded attention, but because she never needed to. In a world of headlines and airs, Lady Sarah Chatto chose something else: stillness, creation, and a life shaped not by decree, but by discipline. But how does someone so reserved express their love for the world? That answer lies not just on canvas, but in compassion. Because when Lady Sarah gives, she gives from the very thing that defines her most: her art, philanthropy. For Lady Sarah Chatto, generosity doesn't come with camera flashes or ribbon-cutting ceremonies. It arrives quietly, often in the form of canvas, color, and care. In 2023, Lady Sarah donated one of her most personal oil paintings, Studio Window, to Horatio's Garden, a charity that creates peaceful, accessible gardens in spinal injury hospitals across the UK. The painting, a tender study of light spilling through a studio pane, wasn't just a donation. It was a message that beauty has the power to heal, that art can speak where words fail, that even the smallest gesture given sincerely can ripple into someone else's recovery. Why Horatio's Garden? Perhaps because its mission mirrors her own life: to create stillness amid chaos, to offer quiet dignity where there's pain. In her own words, she expressed how honored she felt to support those facing life-changing injuries through something so deeply personal: her art. It wasn't the first time she had given back, but it was one of the most revealing. Because behind every brushstroke, there is intention. And in Lady Sarah's case, that intention has always been rooted in empathy. Though she does not hold official charitable roles the way working royals do, Sarah supports a range of causes in her own subtle way, often connected to the arts, education, and healing. And unlike others in the royal family, she doesn't use these efforts to craft a public image. She lets the impact, not the headline, do the talking. In that sense, she mirrors her mother, Princess Margaret, in the best possible way. Margaret was once patron of over 80 organizations, many of which supported culture, mental health, and the dignity of care. And while Sarah's approach is quieter, the heart is the same. When she paints, she brings peace to herself. When she donates that art, she shares that peace with the world. It's easy to admire a palace or a crown. But how often do we stop and admire the hand that gives without needing recognition? Lady Sarah's philanthropy is not a royal obligation. It's a personal offering. The kind of giving that doesn't begin on a stage, but in a studio, in silence. And that silence is what makes it so profound. So what does a woman like this return to when the crowds fade? The canvas is finished, and the duties, subtle as they are done. She returns to what matters most: family, love, and the quiet joy of everyday life. Personal life. In a family often defined by tradition and spectacle, Lady Sarah Chatto has written her own quiet love story. It began not in a ballroom or royal garden, but in the warmth of India, during the early 1980s, when Sarah was accompanying her father on a film project. Amid the sets, fabrics, and cinematic chaos of A Passage to India, she met a young actor named Daniel Chatto. He wasn't a royal, he wasn't famous, but he shared something essential with her: a love for storytelling and a respect for privacy. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Their connection was instant, not dramatic, but deep. They returned to London, continued their quiet courtship, and in 1994, they were married at St. Stephen's, Walbrook, in a ceremony led by Reverend Chad Vara, the founder of Samaritans. The wedding was elegant, understated, and filled with warmth. Sarah wore a gown designed by Jasper Conran, modern yet timeless, a perfect reflection of her spirit. Her bridal party included Zara Phillips and her half-sister Lady Frances, hinting at the close-knit affection that still binds branches of the royal family. But what happened after the ceremony? What does happily ever after look like when you've traded tiaras for oil paints? For Sarah and Daniel, it meant building a family grounded in privacy, love, and personal freedom. They raised 2 sons, both of whom have become fascinating reflections of their upbringing. Samuel Chatto, born in 1996, first followed a traditional academic path: Eton College, then History of Art at the University of Edinburgh. But like his mother, he gravitated toward creativity. Today, he works as a sculptor in West Sussex, his hands shaping stories from stone and clay. In true Chatto fashion, he also became a certified yoga teacher, trained in India, embracing both movement and mindfulness. His younger brother, Arthur Chatto, born in 1999, carved a different path. Also educated at Eton, then geography at Edinburgh, Arthur became known for his physical discipline and public service. He served as Page of Honor to Queen Elizabeth II and later joined the Royal Marines, bringing a sense of strength and stoicism that echoes the royal tradition, yet remains distinctly his own. Sarah and Daniel never pushed them into titles, tabloids, or rigid molds. Instead, they gave them space to grow, to question, to choose. At home, the family enjoys simple pleasures: early morning walks, shared meals, and quiet time in the garden. Sarah is often seen driving her Land Rover Discovery through the streets of Kensington, a subtle symbol of who she is. Royal, yes, but grounded. She still paints, still curates a life where tea is taken slowly, where letters are handwritten, and where legacy is passed on not through ceremony, but through care. Her estimated net worth of $18 million reflects years of artistic success, inheritance, and a life lived without excess. No private jets, no palace intrigue, just a steady life built on taste, talent, and timeless grace. It's easy to get lost in the grand narratives of monarchy. But Lady Sarah Chatto reminds us that there's another kind of royalty, one defined not by titles, but by presence. A quiet presence, a thoughtful presence, a presence that turns a house into a home, a painting into peace, and a life into a lesson. That you don't need a crown to live like a queen. In a world obsessed with noise, Lady Sarah Chatto offers us a masterclass in quiet elegance. Her life, painted with restraint, compassion, and beauty, reminds us that grace doesn't need applause. If her Kensington home reflects legacy, her spirit reflects something rarer: peace. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe that the softest stories often carry the deepest truths.